Greetings and welcome aboard to the Heavy Metal Truckers. We are your hosts. I am Pincushion, that's Frosty, and that is Doppler. In this video, we are going to be covering the new album from Killswitch Engage. The album title that it is.
The Consequence or something like that?
What he said.
I think that's what it was called.
It was.
Or This Consequence?
This Consequence, yes.
Yeah.
So typically what we usually do is we each take turns. I don't know who's going to go first this time, but we discuss how we got into Killswitch and how we discovered them, or if we're still into them, and then we go into our analysis of either the album as a whole, individual tracks, or a combination. So who the fuck wants to go first?
You can go first.
Alright, well, I mean, I figured I might as well go first. I'm the one who suggested it. So, I can't necessarily remember the year. I think it was '08. But, I love how you know.
Which one. I know what it is.
But, I got into Killswitch over at this one's house. We were just hanging out one day, and he showed me their cover of Holy Diver. It was '06? Was it really? Well, yeah, I think it was '08 that we discovered it, but I think it was '06 that cover came out. Somewhere around there. But yeah, no. Got to listen to their cover of Holy Diver from Dio, and Howard Jones's voice spoke tremendously to me in that cover, and I'm just like, all right, so I'm just gonna go for it and just listen. Definitely love the Howard Jones era of Killswitch. I know that a lot. They have the new singer that took over after Howard. I think was the original. Was it Jesse? Yeah.
Yeah, he was the original. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
he was the original.
He came back, and it doesn't sound like the old Killswitch that I used to remember. However, there are some tracks where Howard will come back, and it's a lot of fun to hear Howard sing all over again. So yeah, that's how I was introduced to Killswitch. And as far as this album is concerned, I remember I was out on the road. I think it was during one of my break periods or something. And I saw somewhere, either on one of the social media apps or just like an article online, that there was a new Killswitch album. So I was like, wait a minute, is there really? I went and checked, and it was like 4 days ago was a Killswitch album. So I was like, oh, let's go check it out and see. So I started my drive. I had it going. I listened to the entire album, and I went, kind of reminds me of the Howard Jones era. There are certain songs on here that I remember that I definitely had that Howard feeling, and then others where it was like you definitely knew it was Jesse singing it and everything. However, for the most part, it's new, it's different than Howard's stuff. However, I kind of liked the album. Again, not as much as the Howard Jones era. However, the album itself was fairly decent. I think the biggest one that kind of struck me was the fourth track on the album is I think it was Forever Aligned was the track that kind of spoke to me the most off of the album. And I think that one was the one that gave me that like Howard vibe that I had. But yeah, I'm actually pretty pleased that I listened to the album. It was a lot of fun. Whoever's next.
Hey, get it rated, motherfucker. I gotta rate it.
I got to rate it.
We do 1 out of 10, and we do
Set
set fractions.
fractions.
We do accept.
In other words, a half
Oh.
a point or a quarter point.
All right. Well, I would probably rate this at about a 7.5 for me.
Sounds
Cool. Doppler.
Alright, so for me, I first heard of Killswitch probably back in 02-ish, somewhere around there. About the same time that Howard came on.
Oh. Yeah, that was right, because he joined really early.
Yeah. And then I saw them in concert at Ozfest in 03 with Howard. Now,
Lucky bastard.
now as a metal fan, even back then and to today, I've never been is Pincushion knows, I've never been the biggest metalcore fan. And that's what Killswitch is. They have been for basically ever. And
of course, been me.
So, we can just have this, like, in the middle.
yeah. You know, so I was never the biggest Killswitch. And now that being said, I did enjoy their live show when I saw them. I think it was in 03. It was at Ozfest. And they had a good live show. Like, I was impressed with their live show. You know, which when you put on a decent show, even music you're necessarily the biggest fan of, you'll enjoy more. Now, after Howard left, I don't think I've heard a single song from Killswitch until this album. I'll be honest. Partially because I've always liked Howard's voice. So even though I wasn't necessarily the biggest fan of Killswitch style of music, I still would occasionally, if I would see they put a new song out when Howard was still there, I still would occasionally listen to it just because I like Howard's voice.
If I'm not mistaken, we actually named him as one of the best metal vocalists of the era.
We might have. I don't remember. Or at least an honorable mention. I don't remember.
Yeah.
So, but once he left, I kind of quit paying attention to him until this album. And then Pincushion told me that Frosty wanted to, recommended checking this album out. So I was like, all right. So I'll listen to it. And I listened to it over a couple days. Jesse's cleans aren't bad, and I can see on how some songs they would, especially on this album, I guess. I don't really know because I haven't really listened to much of Jesse's stuff since he came back. But I could see on some songs, including that Forever Aligned, where you would have gotten a little bit of Howard feels, especially on the cleans. In terms of songs that I like, the only two that really I was like, I could see myself listening to again were the last two songs, which is interesting because usually when you get to an end of an album, those are kind of like where the band just throws stuff to finish an album out. Oddly, those were probably the two I could see myself listening to again. Being still to this day, not being a big metalcore fan, or not really caring for metalcore, it's not an album I would listen to normally or like on a regular basis. Like I probably won't go back and listen to it again. That being said, when you consider who Killswitch is and how long they've been around and all these bands that they've influenced over the years, you give them props because they're damn good at what they do. mean, they're one of the best at what they do. They wouldn't still be around today if they weren't. And but like I said, it's just not what I like to listen to on a regular basis. You know, to me, it's still very Americanized metalcore, where it's the songs are, I don't want to say cookie cutter, but they kind of are. Like, because there's all these copycat bands that have come out since then, there's so much that sounds like it out there now. So it's hard for me to really get into it. So for me personally, taking everything into consideration, including personal preferences, but also considering what it is and how good it was for what it is, I gave it a 6.5 out of 10.
Alrighty. So whenever, it was, like you said, we figured out about who Killswitch was around the same time frame. I thoroughly enjoyed what I heard, just because Howard's voice was so damn powerful, and it could easily be present if he wasn't doing metalcore. I seriously believe he could have done just classic heavy metal or even power metal, and easily.
Oh yeah, I think
just he's one of the best vocalists I've ever heard, one of the best. That being said, instrumentally, like, they've always done pretty solid, except for, like, of course, I'm always been more into, like, the more aggressive Killswitch tracks. The lighter ones, just, they're very light and very just kind of little poppy to me, so for me, naturally, I'm not the biggest fan of it, but that's why singles exist, I suppose. But as far as this album goes, whenever he told me about it, I'm like, oh, they put out a new album. Oh shit. Because we all know that, like, the original vocalist is back, and I've never been a big fan of Jesse as a vocalist. It just, there's something to be desired for me personally. Nonetheless, I gave it a go because I'm like, maybe I'll be impressed. And as you can see, I had some thoughts on the matter.
I actually took notes too. I didn't really go over them though, because I don't want to be here all night. You're welcome to, though, if you want to.
Sorry. So the first track, Abandon Us. The beginning was interesting because it reminded me of old school Fear Factory. And it had the vocals in it were pretty punk influenced from what I had heard. I'm not going to be able to go into detail about it right now just because I don't remember. It's been 2 or 3 days since I've heard it. But the clean vocals were actually very well melodic, and the breakdown on Abandon Us, it was way more pop punk than I expected for a breakdown, and I didn't know what to think. I'm like, what the fuck is this? Like, metalcore used to, like, grab you by the balls back in the day, and now it's just, what the hell? Of course, it might have been where I was listening to, the platform I was using to listen to it. That could have easily had something to do with it. I mean, it was on a laptop, but then again, I didn't have anything else at the time, and I just don't have time to listen to stuff all that much these days. So, yeah, or to listen.
It's funny
to
you say
medium.
that, because a lot of my notes were very similar to yours on that song.
That's interesting. Let's see where the next 11 tracks go.
Yeah.
Or 14, 13, whatever. Discoordination. I really enjoyed that opening because it was very thrash influenced for me. There was some subjectivity on the taste in the chorus because it blended blast beats with clean vocals, and I did not know how to feel about it. It was intriguing, but I wasn't sure what to think about that. There was a solid build up to the breakdown, and that thing was well executed for what it was. Aftermath had a very soft and dissonant beginning, and then it kind of just jumped into a general metal core structure, and it had some punk blend I just didn't know what the fuck about.
It was funny because that was the first song on the album that I felt like was a song that would be played live out of the first three,
I can see
or most
it.
likely be played live. Yeah.
And then it slowed down and had a melodic ending, which I thought was kind of interesting. Forever Aligned. This one was intriguing because it had the beginning was more of like the beatdown hardcore style, and had a really catchy groove in the verses. It was interesting because once the chorus came in, it reminded me a lot of like the old school Five Finger Death Punch groove, and then it went back to a blend of like the beatdown hardcore in the verses, which again it made it was impactful. It was not too bad. And it was honestly the most melodic hardcore track that I have heard on the album up to that point, and honestly, potentially overall, just I never expected that to be able to hear hardcore mixed with melodic aspects. Like, not something I would think anyone would put together, but it was well for what it was.
I can see why they chose it as a single.
Yeah. Now, at the end, the yell or scream that he had, that was a really shitty one, as far as I'm concerned. It sounded strained, it was out of pitch, it was like it was kind of potentially thrown in at the last minute, or he didn't have the power to do it. I don't know what it was, but it was bad for me. I did not like that. Aside from that, that was a solid track. For I Believe, it had a solid melodic beginning, and it would, oh my god, the transition into the opening verse was insane. That was well done. Well fucking done. That was one of the smoothest transitions I've ever heard. And this one had some of the best vocals performed on the album, I thought. But then again, this might have been the one where he wasn't trying to go so high, and he was just in his natural, like, chest voice range.
It's a very emotional song too.
Yeah, and it had a pretty strong chorus, but I thought there could maybe been room for improvement, but it was solid nonetheless. The transition back to the verse was well done, and it had a well-structured breakdown as well, I thought. Where It Dies, that was a good one because it had the introduction. It was very reminiscent of Lamb of God, the way it was like a groove metal type thing, but it was creeping in. It just kind of, if I could personify it, it was like just on his tiptoes, just creeping in and ready to just set the stage for what was to come. And there was a very solid groove in the verse, and the chorus went into more pop punk style, which I don't know how you guys are fucking doing this, but okay. Then it went back into solid groove metal style. Now the solo was incredibly well choreographed, and I thought that was actually interesting. And I don't think that about solos normally. I don't typically give a flying fuck about them because this tends to be flashy, fretboard wankery as far as I'm concerned. This one was actually decently well done. Now the high screams, whenever they were present, they were a little odd. Like he's not that good at doing them, or it just, I guess for his timbre on his vocals, it just sounded odd to me, but some people might like it. It was an overall solid groove on the track. Collusion, that was an old school hardcore style, hardcore, old school. Like it gave me old Hatebreed vibes. And I mean, I know hardcore goes before Hatebreed, but still they kind of popularized it to the mainstream to give it a household name as far as I'm concerned. The chorus, again, it went into a pop punk style metalcore, and I'm like, you guys are doing so good, and then you just, anyway. And then it went back to a solid hardcore style metalcore in the verses. And then again, the high screams, they were less than desirable. The low screams in that one, they were a surprise, and they were well done. Like, I really enjoyed how they were conducted. The all of us, I kind of enjoyed this one because this had a very interesting exotic death metal opening, which I didn't expect, but it reminded me of a kind of like a Bohemian style death metal opening, which I thought was really nice. And then it just, sparing no casualties, sparing no time, they just went into the heavy verses. The chorus remained fairly heavy and it had an appropriate level of melody for what I believe their goal was. The instrumental work was impressive even when transitioning back to the verses. There was a steady tempo build up for the breakdown, and it was exotic in almost a Bohemian manner, or I'm not sure how to explain it. I don't want to say Middle Eastern, but well, I guess you could. But it was so similar to the opening. It was really nice, and the breakdown itself, it held it reasonably steady, but yet it wasn't impressive, but it was good for what it was. It was like a 3 out of 5 one change a thing kind of thing. And it ends on a fairly heavy beatdown, hardcore kind of style with it. Broken Glass, it was groove metal with blast beats, opening, and the vocals were running along just hardcore style, and it tried to blend, as before, tried to blend the melody and hardcore, and it seemed very experimental to me. It seemed experimental, but it's as if they knew what they were doing. So it's like, I don't see this falling apart, but this is a little bizarre. For
I
me,
guess I actually enjoyed it more.
yeah, it bordered on avant-garde, and I was very intrigued by it. Requiem. It was standard metalcore consistency for the opening. However, there was a sense of like hesitation or anticipation throughout the beginning. It just something felt off about it. But yet the chorus, it held a lot of confidence and a lot of structure, despite, honestly feeling bland for what it was, but it still held strong in an interesting way. And that, I have on here, more solid structure holds after chorus, holding confusion for the beginning. Because, like I said, the beginning was just a little strange to me. I honestly thought it could have been left off the album or put more in the middle as potentially a filler, just because of how it felt to me. It didn't really feel rushed, but it's like, hey guys, do we need another track? I don't know, but let's see how this goes, and kind of how that came across to me. Overall, I gave it a 6 out of 10. It was a little bit better than okay, but nothing much more than that. Overall, would I actively go to seek it out again? No. If it was playing in the background, would I be offended? No. If it came up again, would I potentially consider skipping it? Yes. So, if it's in the background, like I said, okay, but if I have the option of putting something else on, then I probably would, but it had moments, but overall, I really wasn't sure what to think about it, mainly because consistently the chorus went into a pop punk aspect, and I fucking hate that.
Yeah, it's become, in the last 10 years, 5 years especially, it's become pretty common within metalcore.
It has, and it's just, I hate it, and so that's the reason I didn't care for it, but it wasn't terrible. 3 out of 5 wouldn't change a thing.
In other words, all of us enjoy Howard more.
Yes, if Howard was in this, if Howard was still here, I feel like it would have been structured a lot differently. The melodies would have been carried differently. The choruses would have been done differently and held just a more punchy aspect, I feel like, just because I do think Howard is more of a metal guy, whereas Jesse might just be old school hardcore, but trying to fit into the modern metalcore world, which is just It's like a little tug of war game almost.
We actually saw Howard in concert again about 4 years ago with his new band, his other band, Avatar.
Yes, whenever we went to see Avatar, and Howard did amazing, and he wouldn't done even better if he hadn't cut the goddamn mic almost half the time.
Like, yeah, I was gonna say he did, yep.
Now, the question I have for you, Pincushion, is if Howard was on this album as the singer, leaving every other aspect of the songs the way they are, would you have enjoyed it more if Howard was the singer?
Through the verses, possibly. Choruses still had this instrumentally a pop punk aspect, which I typically loathe. So it would have been very dependent on what that instrumental, how would Howard have approached his vocals with that? Would he have made up for it, and would he have been able to pull it up to a higher standard or a higher listenability? So it greatly would have, like you said, verses would have been fine, would have been solid. Choruses, it's room for debate or room for questionable.
So basically, it's just the pop punk that's getting to you more than anything. I guess same question for you there, Doctor.
A little bit, I think. I think a little bit, just because I really do like his voice. I don't know if it would have made a massive difference, but I think it would have helped at least a little bit.
I would have to agree with the both of you on that. Definitely Howard being my favorite Killswitch singer. But
Howard is one of those lists that when you hear him, you know who he is. He's very recognizable.
Yeah. Alrighty, well, with all that being said, any final words, thoughts? Yes. Awesome. No one would have cared anyway. So, with that being said, we are glad you could be here to join us on this conversation regarding the new Killswitch album. Of course, listen to it for yourself and make your own assumptions or personal feelings regarding the matter, and we can carry this discussion forward in the comments. Until next time, keep rolling heavy.